How many people do you really need? Do you really know? Well, in this episode, we are going to be talking about the differences between headcount and FTE and the critical impact it makes to business. Have you been asking yourself, am I overstaffed? Am I understaffed? What's the difference between headcount and full-time equivalent? Many times people think that's full-time employee, but FTE actually stands for full-time equivalent. In this episode, I'm super excited to welcome you to WFM Tipsy Thursdays. I am your show host, Juanita Coley, the Contact Center Whisperer, the CEO and founder of Solid Rock Consulting, and that is what we're going to be diving into today. So hey guys, welcome to another episode of WFM Tipsy Thursdays. You already know we are talking about WFM and all the tips and tricks that you can learn to make sure that you are impactful when it comes to workforce management, customer experience, employee experience, and operational efficiency. This year, we are using WFM Go Beyond to guide us through all of our conversations. In this episode, we are talking about scheduling. So we've been talking about scheduling all month, and we're continuing the conversation. And I'm super excited about the conversation that we're having today because we're talking about headcount versus FTE. Why is that so important? And what are the impacts? What are the impacts to the employee experience? What is the impact to customer experience? And what is the impact to business profitability? Most times organizations, and it's very common to use these two words interchangeably. Oh, I need X, Y, and Z FTE. When in actuality, what the organization is really trying to articulate is that they need X, Y, and Z headcount. Okay. And so that really comes into play when we're thinking about our interval staffing. Case in point, at 8 o'clock, you may need 35 people. And at 8:30, your interval requirement may hop all the way up to 75 people sitting on the phone. Your headcount requirement may be 75. So to go from 8 o'clock, 35 to 8:30, 75, that's a huge jump. Right. And so to think about that in an FTE, a full-time equivalent, you could be, if you're staffing at 75 people, full-time FTEs, you could be significantly overstaffed at 9:30 when you drop back down to the need of 35. And so it's really important that you critically understand the differences between a headcount need based on your interval staffing requirements. Okay. And what does this mean? What does this mean? This is your, what am I doing with my hand here? This is your 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, your intervals throughout the day. How many people do you need based on that interval, based on what your demand, what you're forecasting you're going to have come in? It's critically important that you understand what that interval demand is and what that capacity is going to be so that you can make sure that you are staffing appropriately. Okay, your headcount requirement is going to look at, okay, how many butts in seat do I need? Okay, I'm taking 300 calls this interval, and to handle these 300 calls, I'm going to need, 280 people answering the phones, butts and seats at that time. Well, just because you have 280 people answering the phone, that does not mean that you have 280 FTE. Because some of these people may be part-time, some of these people may be just working 30 minutes for the day. So that doesn't mean that they're necessarily full-time equivalents. Okay. And so it's really critically important that you understand that, because the impact to your customer experience, your employee experience, and business profitability is going to be directly impacted. And that is what we're talking about on this episode of WFM Tipsy Thursdays this week. I'm super excited to welcome an all-time favorite, all-time star, okay, all-star back to WFM Tipsy Thursday. We have none other than Dan, the Smitley himself, okay. He is the consultant over at 2-3 Consulting. I'm super excited, Dan, to have you back. First of all, you're one of the top episodes that we have, and most, views and requests. Yeah. Do a little shoulder thing, because you be dropping all these gems. And so I'm super excited to have you back with us for another episode this year. Thank you so much for being with us. For those that don't know who you are, Dan, can you tell us a little bit more about you?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I come on this show just for that kind of an introduction. Like, I get low, I get down, and then I play your intro for like how awesome I am. Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Who I am, Dan Smitley, as you said, I'm on LinkedIn a whole lot. So if you guys ever need like contact center gifts, Will Ferrell memes, all connected to how hard workforce management is, I'm your guy. I'm your guy. So find me on LinkedIn. I've been doing contact centers and workforce management for, I'm gonna say, plural decades and just leave it at that. I feel like that's a sweet spot of like I can stay in plural decades for a while, but happy to be back and a really interesting conversation today. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, I want to hop right in. So I've kind of already talked about, headcount versus FTE and why that's important that we as workforce leaders, operations leaders, distinguish between the two because we're commonly using those interchangeably. But what I really love about why I wanted you on for this episode is because you talk about the impact to employee experience like no other, right? When it comes to workforce management. And so I know that you can really do this topic justice. Can you talk to us a little bit about the impacts of getting headcount versus FTE wrong when it comes to scheduling?
Absolutely. So I think you set it up really nicely about the difference between headcount and FTEs. I think for me, I boil it down almost to real world, right? One says this is what I need in a vacuum, right? Depending upon volume, handle time. We might just need this from a workload perspective. But then when we start layering in real life shrinkage, right? People getting sick, people taking too long in the bathrooms, people talking to their neighbors and distracting them in the seat next to them, we start to finally start seeing the complexities of headcount versus FTEs. We start seeing that the calculation's a lot more complex. From my perspective, that's one way to think about scheduling. When we think about scheduling to say to meet a demand, volumes in at X, handle times at Y, shrinkages at Z, we're gonna try to get there. But if we create schedules, if we're thinking about scheduling as simply to demand, I think we've missed at least half of the equation. And so for me, the other half of the equation is the agent experience.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think about it this way. So you talked about like 35, 75, down to 40, and maybe you're creating these crazy micro shifts, pulling people in for 30 minutes and they didn't ask for it, right? That's the key. If they're coming in for 30 minutes and they're remote, they connect, disconnect, but they didn't ask for it, that person's not staying very long, right? Like if I had to work at 30-minute intervals and come in, clock out, clock in, clock out, I'm not going to stay around. So that's, I think, where I'm thinking about scheduling maybe a little bit differently than just headcount, maybe a little bit differently than just FTE. I'm starting to want to consider how do I get the people that are going to take these phone calls, take these chats, take these emails, and actually create an environment where they're happy and satisfied is number one. And then if I want to push myself, and we can go in this direction too, a little bit more, I want to say, how can I make their community and their family happy? Right. So I love WFM. Don't get me wrong. I love about efficiencies and optimizations and getting things perfect to the forecast, to the volume, to the scheduling. But when we do it in a vacuum that says these are numbers, not people, and we remove the need of real life, we remove the need of their communities and families, we remove the needs of what they actually want. I don't know. I think we're just doing ourselves a disservice. And I think as WFM professionals, we could be doing more to kind of sit in that tension between customer demand and employee demands.
Hey, are you ready to identify how well your workforce management strategies align to your CX, customer experience, EX, employee experience, or your business profitability goals? Well, take our free 5-minute assessment at WFMGoBeyondScore.com and get your personalized results and recommendations delivered directly to your inbox. WFMGoBeyondScore.com. See you there. So now we gotta walk down that. We gotta walk down that path now because you led us down that path. What are some of the things that we as workforce management professionals, and then I want you to put on your operations hat, also operation leaders, what is it that we could be doing more? What are some of the things that you're like, man, this is something that we could be doing more when it comes to schedule flexibility or thinking about the impacts, right, of FTE versus headcount and scheduling?
It's honestly, it's one thing. And like, if you've
Mm,
seen me and you heard me before, I get a little repetitive because I see it as the truth. And for me, what can we do? It's one thing, get curious. And so, what I mean by getting curious, I mean actually asking the questions and then actually listening. So, what actually asking the questions? Because look, maybe that's a survey, but is it an annual survey? If you're sending out an annual survey, what happens when the single mom's life changes from spring to summer to fall, and she needs something a little bit differently, right? The annual survey is not going to help. So you need to be doing quarterly, monthly surveys asking, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And trying to listen. Feedback loop, right? You're trying to feedback to say we can't do everything, but maybe we can try this or that. But you need to be listening or at least asking. And then the listening sounds like getting creative.
mm.
I can't do that for you. I can't do that for all of you. But what if I tried this instead? What if I tried that instead? For me, how can we get better about flexibility, about meeting the needs of the employee? It's about honestly digging in, getting curious, and then listening before we have the answers. Listen before we assume we already know what they want.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So I have an acronym. You may have heard me say this before, but I have a talk that I do. It's called the CEO plan. And the C stands for creating. And part of creating, any good creator is constantly in a constant state of curiosity, right? Is because that's what it takes to create, right? It takes you always asking questions and being in a constant state of discovery, even though that's a conversation for another time. But my point is that I absolutely love that. If we just stay in a place of curiosity, it will allow us to create from a place of servitude, right? Because we're curious about how can I serve the need and how can I be of service and how can I add value? And I may can't say yes to this, but can I do this, right? It's thinking of all these different things that we could do instead. How can I say yes, right? What can I say yes to? I think that's so good. Question I would love to know, have you seen organizations do it right?
Mm. I want to say yes. Like, I want to say yes. What do we mean by right? So I've seen this. I've seen organizations with good hearts, good intentions fail because of bad systems and processes.
Mm.
I've seen other organizations with amazing systems and processes and absolutely miss it on the heart. And so, like, it's a rarity. It almost feels like a bit like a unicorn to where this organization's just firing on all cylinders and is getting this agent flexibility, getting this scheduling, more than just giving the employees everything they want, more than simply aligning to customer demand, kind of hitting that sweet spot. Honestly, I don't think I've seen it because I've always seen an organization struggle with one side or the other. Have you? Have you seen them? And maybe your follow up question is like, how did they get there?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've seen I'm gonna leave them nameless because I haven't gotten their permission to share. But I have seen an organization. Actually, I was doing some work for an organization in Chicago. I can say that, right? They're in Chicago, and I was like freezing when I was there. So it was in wintertime. I'm kind of giving like clues, no clues. But anyway, one thing that I love about the particular organization is that they had this work when you will kind of model, right?
Mm,
They also had a mandatory sabbatical that employees had to take after, I think after 2 years, they had a mandatory sabbatical. Like, and they actually tracked it. Like, you couldn't log onto your computer. You were locked out of your computer for 2 weeks and you had to take a mandatory paid sabbatical. I've never seen it before, never seen it since. But and the reason I'm thinking about this now is because one of the questions we hear a lot and we see even now when we're thinking about the future of work and we're talking about AI and we're talking about all these different things is I'm like, well, how far off are we from getting it right, right? What does getting it right look like? And I think that looks different for every organization, right? Because every business need is different. Who you're serving serving is different. And so when we think about, okay, well, how do we produce the right schedules? Well, it depends on what your employee ecosystem looks like. And it depends on what your customer ecosystem looks like. See, it's a very specific type of person who goes to work at Apple, right? Versus the type of person who may go and work at Deloitte or who goes and work at Walmart, right? Like these are different, just like every company has a customer profile, if you will, like a ICP. Every company kind of also has an employee profile, like what works for that organization. And so this is why I think, and I'm ideating while I'm having this thought, because I think this is why the needle constantly moves, right? Is because depending on the organization, what's right from a customer experience or an employee experience perspective is completely different.
Absolutely. And so if we circle back to this kind of setup that you have, like, are you overstaffed? Are you understaffed? How do you know? Right? It's unique in every situation. And so you or I could go into an organization, give them a calculation that says you are under overstaffed and walk away. But if we're not taking into account their unique customer demand, right? So if their
Right.
service level example is 80/20, but their customers are demanding so much more, giving them an 80/20 calc is going to position them so that they're meeting demand but failing the customer, right? We can give them scheduling that meets the demand and puts their people exactly where they need to be on intervals, and it's just right, perfect, right? And perfect service, but it's ticking off all of their agents because it changes their culture. We've failed. And so when we come and think about this conversation of right staffed, overstaffed, understaffed, the question is a lot more complex than simply how many bodies do you need or what is your FTE equivalent. It is what is your customers' demand for loyalty, if that's a goal of yours. What do your employees' demand for loyalty? And then how do we do that from a scheduling perspective? So I love this conversation when we have FTEs and a headcount. That's one piece of a much bigger puzzle that says, how do we need to schedule? Needs to meet the business need, the customer need, and the employee needs.
Absolutely. And I think that's what, of course, I'm biased because it's my book, right? But I think that is what I am trying to articulate in WFM Go Beyond, right? So the book is sectioned into the two parts, right? It's the tactical side of like, how do you do the thing? Right? Like, how do you do forecasting? How do you do scheduling? How do you do intraday? How do I get you the headcount number? Right. But then how do we go beyond that? That's section 2, right? Like, how do we do WFM by design so that we can have this design that meets the business, profitability goals? How do we meet our customer experience goals? How do we meet our employee experience goals? This is being very strategic in how do I now mold this discipline of workforce management and shape workforce management. Yes, the fundamentals are always going to be the fundamentals. Like 2 + 2 is going to be 4 all day long, right? Like I can't rewrite how 2 + 2 being 4, but I don't always have to do 2 + 2 to equal 4. I could do 1 + 3. I could do 3 + 1. I could do 2 + 2, right? If I want to get to 4, it's multiple ways to get to 4. I could do 1.5 and then another 1.5, which is going to give me 3. And then I can say, okay, give me 1, right? Like there's multiple ways to get to 4. And so I think fundamentals of arithmetic is the same, right? 2 + 2 is 4, 1.5, 1.5 + 1, right? What we're talking about is addition. So the fundamentals of addition are the same, but how I get to 4, the path to getting to 4 may look different depending on what I need the 4 to be. Am I talking about ounces? Am I talking about cups? Am I talking about whatever, what does that 4 represent? And so I think that is the goal of WFM Go Beyond and where I really want to push leaders and to think about, yes, we need the tactics. We need to understand arithmetic. We need addition. We need subtraction. We need to understand the foundation and the tactics, but we have to go beyond that, which is why I love talking to leaders like you that are thinking very transformatively around like, okay, how do we get to yes? What does that 4 need to look like? Your 4 may look different than my 4, but that doesn't mean that my 4 is wrong and your 4 is right, or your 4 is right and my 4 is wrong. Hey, transformative leader, listen, have you grabbed your copy of WFM Go Beyond? Go and grab your copy at WFMGoBeyond.com. WFM Go Beyond is sectioned into 2 sections. Section 1 is the foundation and the fundamentals of workforce management. The core 4, you've heard me talk about this. Data gathering, forecasting, scheduling, intraday. But section 2 is the part that I get super excited about, especially for 2025, because we are pushing and encouraging and challenging leaders to go beyond and push into transformative impact. And section 2 is going to do that to help you understand how you tie your WFM strategy into your CX initiatives, your EX initiatives, and business profitability goals. So if you're an operational leader, executive, a WFM leader that has a operations efficiency goal, okay, and you want to drive transformative impacts, WFM Go Beyond is your resource. So go to WFMGoBeyond.com and grab your copy today. Bye.
I go back to your C, right? So your CEO, it's create, right? Was it create or create? I heard create, and then I interpreted it as creator, and then I interpreted it as creative. And I was like, that's super interesting to think about workforce management professionals as creatives, right? So often, I'm sure, I don't know about your path, but my path to WFM came through a spreadsheet because I'm super logical. I love a good amount of like structure and just, I like it, but I've had to learn how to be creative. And I think that's your go beyond, right? WFM professionals might start with this. I have a workflow, I have a process, I have a system, it is bop, 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 and this is how I do it. And if you're a young professional, you need to stay inside of that system to some extent, right? Like fresh eyes, let's think about something different, but learn the foundations and the fundamentals. But it's when we start getting into leadership, it's when we start getting into a little bit more that we get to turn on that creative, right? To start thinking differently around how can we do scheduling a little bit more complexly, a little bit more holistically. I personally love the idea of thinking about my WFM professional network as creatives, that these aren't like robot analytical beep boop, like 2 + 2 4 always, but like starting to get creative and paint with the schedules, to paint a picture of how we can do it. I don't know. For me, that's exciting. For me, it's cool to think about WFM as a creative pursuit versus simply an analytical, formulaic pursuit. That's fun.
I absolutely love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Dan. Tell the people where they can find you. I know you told them earlier, but in case they, came in late, tell the
No,
people where they can find
absolutely.
you and what you got coming up next.
Yeah, so you guys can find me on LinkedIn. That's honestly one of the best places. I do have a website, but I use it as just like a storing house for all of my ideas. So 23consulting.com. That's the number 2, the word 3consulting.com. You can check out kind of my services and what I do there. The best place I'm going to add value in your life, though, is LinkedIn. So search me up, Dan Smitley. I'm going to try to put out like 5 pieces of content for you guys every week. And what's coming up is honestly just more of this, trying to connect, add value. Probably going to be hitting a couple conferences coming up in May. But more than anything, I just love having conversations. So reach out to me if you've got questions. I just love having these talks.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for being our guest. How epic was Dan? I already know. I know. Leave us some comments. Okay. Leave the comments. What follow-up questions do you have for Dan, and when we go, what we gonna bring him back on, right? What we gonna bring him back to talk about? I absolutely love talking. It's a couple people that I absolutely always love talking. I mean, I like talking to a lot of people, which is why I have the show, right? But Dan is one of my favorites that I love talking to because he gets it. He gets it. It's beyond the tactics. The tactics are super important, right? We have to understand how to get to 4, whether that's 2 + 2, the 1.5, and the 1. But we have to also be the creative where we are being transformative with our thoughts and pushing beyond just the tactics. And as you already know, that's what we're talking about all year. So listen, if you have yet to grab your book, make sure you head over to WFMGoBeyond.com, grab your copy of the book. Don't just grab the copy though of the book, make sure you grab the workbook, because we're not just talking about it this year, we're actually working through the exercises and so that we can move from tactical to transformative. You already know what to do. Until next time, go be great and let's make impact. See y'all soon. Bye.